Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whenever you are watching or listening to our podcast, welcome to another episode of the Wings of Wisdom podcast. My co-host today is not a WCC coach. Instead, today, Dr. Charles Piscatello joins me to interview our special guest. Chuck is a senior instructional designer at Ashland University and also professor of sociology and marketing. Chuck, what a joy to have you with us today.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. So
All
I have
right.
to introduce Nate.
Go for it.
Our guest today is a pastor, speaker, and author, and an AU alumni. He serves as senior pastor at Park Street Church here in Ashland, right down the street from the College of Business here on College. He's an undergraduate here at AU and a seminary degree. So I'd like to introduce Reverend Nate Bebout.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see both of you and hear both of you.
Yay. How's it going today? I know you're so busy today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Today's great. We had snow on the ground this morning, but now the sun is out. It's warming the earth, and we are grateful. The natural cleansing system at Ashland is at work. The pickers are coming and taking people's trash away. It's a cycle of life.
Can you explain that to everyone?
No,
that
I
was
don't
weird to me when I moved to Ashland.
I don't want to explain it at all. Our city every year does an annual spring cleanup where you are just given a green light to put all of the junk you don't want to haul away out on your curb. It's kind of like a get out of jail free card. You just get to put as much as you want out on the curb, and the city comes and picks it up. However, it's my observation that the city only picks up 1/4 of what is left out because there is this large community of dumpster diver curb trash recyclers that come out. So it's a great time of the year because you get to get rid of all your stuff, and apparently your junk is somebody else's treasure. So
I live in the country. I don't know if that applies to where I live too or not.
well, just leave some stuff out on the side of the road and see what happens.
Yeah, good idea.
People that don't live in Ashland ask me if they could put their crap in my yard, and I'm more than happy. It's fine.
Yeah.
Say that again, Chuck.
Like if, for instance, I think it was last year, Elise, my boss, needed to get rid of a mattress. So she just brought it to work with her and, just dropped it off on my curb. And then, someone took the mattress.
That's awesome. That's great. So I'm going to bring a truckload of full stuff. So
and put them in Nate's yard.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll divide 50% the other 50 Chuck's yard. All right, let's start from the beginning, Nate. What brought you to Ashland University as an undergrad?
So I felt a call to ministry in high school, but I was kind of feeling a little bit stuck because I didn't really want to attend a traditional Christian university. That's always been really big for me, that faith is always, you have the ability to freely choose it or freely walk away. And with no disrespect intended to define Christian institutions throughout the country, all the requirements that come with Christian institutions feel somewhat coercive to me. And so I was kind of looking for a place that had an ability for me to get an education that would allow me to go on and do the ministry that I wanted. But I wasn't really interested in a place where everybody thought the same. I wanted to experience different perspectives, different worldviews. And so Ashland kind of fit the bill. There's a great, very grounded Christian community, but there's also every position and walk of life and worldview available. And I think that's, for me, what makes Ashland so special. There is a willingness to dialogue and a willingness to be friends with people who, maybe you don't always agree about every little thing about life, but you can certainly learn from each other, hopefully, and grow from those experiences. So that's what really drew me to Ashland. And I came in 2003 and I have been here ever since. I love it here.
You answered a question that I had that was a follow-up to his number one, is did you come to Ashland because it was a Christian university? So I like your answer to that because I find it to be a very unique Christian university for the reason that you mentioned. But did you know what a brethren was when you came here?
No. Yeah. Like many people around the world who have not heard of this very small denomination, I had no clue. And in fact, I was so, when I encountered it, I met this group of undergrads who all seemed to know each other from like childhood. And I kind of just assumed then that they all grew up with one another. But then as I got to know these guys, it was like, well, this guy's from Indiana, this guy's from Pennsylvania, this guy's from Florida, but they all know each other and act like they've known each other since they were children. And I was finally like, how do you all know each other? And they were like, we're brethren. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me. So I encountered that pretty early on at Ashland. Yeah, it ended up for me, I feel like feeling very providential because even though I had experienced other traditions within Christianity, I had not experienced one that really felt like such a fit for me. And so, yeah, I was one of those rare folks who came in and drank the Kool-Aid and loved the worldview, loved the Anabaptist insistence on separation of church and state, and yet the also insistence of the importance of the Christ-filled life is one of practicing what you say you believe by demonstrating kindness and gentleness and goodness in the world. And all those things really resonated with me and continue to.
That's amazing. What did you end up majoring in as an undergrad?
So I double majored in religion and philosophy. The religion major at Ashland University is fairly small compared to some other more comprehensive majors that have more kind of core requirements connected to them. So I found myself with plenty of space in my schedule to get a second major. And I didn't know I liked philosophy. I had never been exposed to philosophy. I grew up in Appalachia. And I took an intro to philosophy class with Dr. Louis Mancha, and I just loved it. And it was one of those, I was good at it, even though I'd never done it before. It was the way that my brain is wired is definitely geared toward this kind of reflective and critical thinking. And so I just took to it like a duck in water. And I still find myself constantly reading philosophy. It has been definitely, I'm so glad I got that second major because it was and continues to be a real source of help to me in my vocation. And also just as I raise my family and think about what's important and think about the meaning of life and all that stuff, I feel like I continue to be such a believer in the liberal arts education model. And I'm wishing more and more people, especially in this political climate, just had a little bit of philosophy. I mean, I think our conversations could be so much better if people just had a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of reasoning. I think that would help us move a lot farther down the road.
So you speak of matcha. What other courses did matcha teach that you loved, or what other professors stand out alongside matcha?
Yeah, I love courses with Dr. Bill Vaughn, who's still in the philosophy department. And on the religion side of things, I love classes with Dr. Don Reinhardt, who's since passed away. It's been a long time since I went to AU, but my senior year was Dr. Pete Slay's first year. And so I got to have a great class with him. Yeah, there were so many folks that were really formative, but yeah, I would certainly put Dr. Mancha, Dr. Vaughn, Dr. Reinhardt, and on my kind of Mount Rushmore of folks who really helped influence the way I approach thinking and faith and all that stuff.
So I like to throw in also, like, did you, since we all belong to the same workout group,
Yes.
did you take any classes with folks that you hang out with now?
I not really, yeah. So we all work out together on a variety of mornings. I know my limitations, so I took 0 math classes. So we have a math professor who works out with us. And I was not an Ashbrook scholar. I wasn't really interested in the political side of things as an undergrad. I think I've grown more aware of the way that philosophy and politics overlap after I graduated. So no, there's not a huge overlap of people that I'm friends with now and people that I took courses with.
What about Dr. Metzger, Mitch?
No, I didn't have any classes with him either. He was in psychology. I had some psychology courses, but none with Dr. Metzger. So that probably is why I'm able to be friends with these guys. They don't know what a doofus I was at age 21.
That's funny. You say the AU for seminary.
Yeah.
What led you to make that decision?
Well, our denomination, the Brethren, the very small denomination that I'm a part of, founded the university and the seminary. And by the time I was a senior in undergrad, I kind of had realized that this particular tradition was the one that was resonating with me. And so we only have one seminary, really, that's the Brethren Seminary. It's in Ashland. I wasn't necessarily planning on staying in Ashland. I had kind of lined up some missionary work with some other Brethren folks overseas. But the way it all ended up working out was right before I left for that mission work, they closed the mission that had been open for 11 years. And I found myself kind of reevaluating. And I was in town. I was working at a church, a Brethren church. So seminary was just a very logical step, the next place where I needed to go. And again, it was kind of like I didn't necessarily know really the difference between Ashland Theological Seminary and other schools. But now that I'm in ministry and I have so many other friends who are in ministry who have gone to a variety of other seminaries, it certainly is the right school, was the right school for me. I got an incredible education by some really world-class scholars over there, and a real preparation for the practical work that's involved in my day-to-day life. So I had an awesome experience at the graduate level connected to AU as well.
I'm interested in how you got at a pretty young age, because you're 10 years in this year,
Yeah.
how they roped you in to be the pastor at Park Street at
Oh,
such a young
it's been 10
tender
years.
age.
Sure.
When did
Yeah.
you start? When you were like, what, 15?
So it's kind of funny. I've been serving in my congregation now. This is my 10th year. Ministry is funny because you can kind of get plugged in right away if you have just a willingness to serve wherever you're needed. And so even though I'm only turning 40, I'm still young, guys, right? You're supposed to encourage me here.
You look 25, to be honest.
There
You don't
you
look
go.
40.
I got to start getting the just for men and the beard. But other than that, so even though I'm only 40, what a young person I am. I've been in full-time ministry now for 18 years and a senior pastor for 10 years. So actually, yeah, I'm finding more and more that I am not the young person on staff anymore. In fact, I'm increasingly out of touch, which is great.
You find like that's like a reflection of the Brethren denomination? Because I see like you bring in young folks all the time to preach. Just you have this amazing bench of people and like that, never even went to college. So do you think it's just an extension of the Brethren denomination to just see like the gifts in people that can preach and teach?
Well, I think that because we are in proximity to AU and ATS, our church particularly feels a burden to help identify and raise up young leaders in our movement. There are certainly no other cities in the United States that are the training ground for future brethren pastors. Certainly we draw from all different places and all walks of life, but as far as what a traditional path would look like for people to enter into ministry through our denomination, most roads go through Ashland. And so I definitely feel that personal responsibility. And it's just a reflection too for me of the gratitude that I was given opportunities. I was, like I said, I've been now in full-time ministry for 18 years. And so obviously very early on, I was given opportunities to try and to fail and to learn a lot of lessons and to learn a lot about people and systems and all the things that go into managing kind of complicated organizations. But yeah, I'm really grateful for the dynamic community that we have, and that our church continues to feel a responsibility to train and develop young people to serve.
It's wonderful. I don't want to skip your time at the seminary. So, what, in what ways did your seminary experience shape how you see ministry and leadership today? And also, if you could tell us what makes the seminary, AU, a special or even a unique place.
So I had already been serving in full-time ministry for 3 years when I started at Ashland Theological Seminary. And I think those were really, really important years for me because I would find myself in classes with other people who came straight from undergrad, and the professor would be lecturing on stuff that was very day-to-day, real, practical. And I remember just furiously taking notes and looking over and seeing the people who just came out of undergrad, they weren't even paying attention. And I wanted to grab them and be like, you're going to need to know this. Like, as somebody who's kind of been in the church for a while, like, these kinds of lessons are going to be the things that you deal with on a weekly basis. So I'm really glad that I kind of had that experience of knowing what I don't know coming into, knowing the kind of challenges and the things of learning that I needed to kind of expand into. And then I think for me, what made my time at Ashland Seminary so meaningful was kind of a continuation of a theme that I talked about earlier, which was a lot of different perspectives. I heard from seminary professors who didn't always share my convictions, some that really challenged a lot of my assumptions, and kind of got to go through seminary in a cohort of people from a bunch of different denominations, not just Brethren Church. And so I just loved that, learning alongside other people, hearing different perspectives. And then for me, again, just the quality of education that I got at Ashland Theological Seminary. I feel like it's a top-notch seminary with really legitimate academic chops. And yeah, I was challenged and I was shaped, again, not simply for the sake of accumulating theological information, but I was equipped to actually serve people in my context in a way that makes sense. So I really love that balance, that combination. That was all really meaningful to me.
Is it called practitioner ministry or practical ministry?
Yeah, so I have a master's degree in practical theology, is
Practical
what the degree
theology.
is called. And that was kind of a long story. I started a different degree program, but it was certainly, I love my experience, and the degree has been serving me very well.
You mentioned world-class professors. Can you share with us some names?
Absolutely. At the time, we had a great leader named Dr. Paul Chilcote. He's no longer on faculty, but people who still are Dr. Dan Hawk. I just loved class with him. Dr. Paul Overland was incredible. I had great class with a former faculty person named Dr. Rob Douglas. And then certainly for me, one of the most formational was a former faculty member, Dr. Terry Wardle. Very influential in my ministry and just an incredible, again, a world-class leader in the church, and I was so grateful for my time under his instruction. I'm now that I'm thinking of, I'm just going to keep rattling them off. Dr. Marvin McMickle taught my homiletics class, which is the art of preaching, and this man is the best preacher I've ever heard in my life. He went on to be a president of a historically Black university, and I think he's now retired. But I just feel so privileged to have studied under these people because they are truly, in my mind, just like a kind of Hall of Fame cast of men and women who just really have a sincerity of faith, but also just an incredible knowledge of meaningful, important things that would help me in my ministry context.
I always find it wild that you preach at a church that I would find very intimidating to preach at, because you have folks from the seminary and professors, and they're all taking notes on the things that you potentially could get wrong. And it's just like was it always, I mean, you make it seem effortless, but like was it always this effortless, like from the beginning? Because I've only watched you for like what, 3 years now.
I think that what saved me in the early years is I didn't know how intimidated I should be. My ignorance was a great shield. I was very humbled to be offered this position. Certainly I knew they were, seminary professors and professors of religion and very former pastors, educated persons serving our church. But I was just too naive and ignorant to be intimidated by that. And so just a lot of grace. Also, yeah, I just think that people are very generous with me. But it's a fun congregation to preach to because, for the reasons you mentioned, you really do have to know what you're talking about. I mean, they will shout me down from the audience if I am giving stuff that's not correct and accurate. I was reflecting on a few months ago, I confused hay and straw, and I almost got yelled off of stage by people who were like, no, that's not how that works. It was such a funny, and I loved it. I was like, oh, good. These people are keeping me honest. I do not have a passive congregation that I can just get up and say whatever I want. I have
And they're patient too.
They're paying attention. They are very smart, and they definitely will call me out if I say nonsense.
So you have a unique delivery, I believe, that it's like you're approaching a punchline like half of your sermon. So could you talk about like how you use like humor in communication?
Humor disarms people like nothing else really can. And I love to laugh. And I also just love the kind of communal catharsis that can come when you are all laughing together. You never feel better than after an evening spent with your friends when you were just laughing a lot together. Or you go, see a stand-up comedian or even just watch one on Netflix. There's something really therapeutic and helpful about laughing. And because I'm from Appalachia and I don't know better, um, I just have never felt like approaching God with a lot of serious, somber, kind of uptight legalism. I just never, that was never the way I encountered God, and certainly not how I read Jesus in the scriptures. I think there's a lot of joy and playfulness, and certainly we're talking about important things, but mostly also I think my trick in life, if I have one, is I just don't take myself very seriously, which is quite a juxtaposition because, as you mentioned, the congregation is well read and kind of highbrow in some ways. But yeah, I think I just don't take myself super seriously, and that kind of willingness to laugh and willingness certainly to laugh at myself hopefully gives permission for people to feel comfortable and accepted and welcome into a church rather than kind of coming into a stiff and formal environment. I'm hoping to create environments where people encounter the truths of scripture, but they do so in a way that there's joy and there's laughter as well.
Yeah, speaking of communication, Nate, and also reflecting on your work as a pastor and consultant, how do you adjust your communication style across different settings like preaching, consulting, or writing?
Yeah, I try to, I say this every time that I officiate a wedding. I basically tell them, leading up to the wedding, I am your pastor and I can give you some counseling on best practices and kind of walk you through some things that you're going to find in your marriage that might be sources of tension or disagreement. And so I'm your pastor. But on the wedding day, I need you just to think of me like a vendor. Just tell me what you want me to do. This is your day. And so it's kind of funny. And I remember this happening several years ago. I was doing lots of weddings because I was so involved with college ministry. And, I end up sometimes some summers officiating 7, 8, 9 weddings in a summer.
Wow.
And I remember one summer in particular, uh, two different couples got married in 2 back-to-back weekends, and they had a lot of overlap from friends. And the first couple said, we want you to give a 10-minute sermon and we want it to be very funny. Tell as many jokes as you can fit 10 minutes. And so I did that. And then the next weekend, the couple had requested that I do basically a 45-minute, very serious sermon with a gospel presentation in it. And they used the word somber. They said they wanted it to be somber.
Somber tone.
I was like, okay. And so I did. I was like, I did what they asked. And I remember people who attended both weddings being like, that was so strange
Confused.
to experience. And for me, I definitely want to be somebody who communicates the truth of scripture, but I really want to be a great communicator. And I think
Mm.
great communicators can accept the constraints of the environment they're in and still deliver a message that's impactful. And so these days, I look for opportunities to get put out of my comfort zone. A couple years ago, I spoke at an orthodontist convention. Why do they want a pastor? Nobody knows. But I say yes to invitations because, especially if they're in environments that I'm not used to presenting in, because I think this will help me grow as a communicator, put me in a context that I'm not familiar with, and I have to again be honest and do the work, figure out a way to relay the message in a way that will with those hearers.
How important was communication in the class that you took at EU?
I had a great communications prof named Dr. Rodrigues. I don't know if he's at the university anymore. And I loved it. I somehow got in that class when I was a lot farther on. I think I might have been a junior or even a senior. I think it's normally 101 level. I think it's like an intro level class. But I loved my experience. I have nothing but good memories about that class. And certainly the resource of the writing center was important to me as a freshman. I'm coming in again from Appalachia. I don't necessarily know grammatic structures as well as I should. And the kind of formatting that was used at the time was all new to me. And so I got a lot of help from people at the writing center and then my communications class to help me figure out what you're trying to accomplish when you're communicating. The goal isn't to fill up the time, but the goal is to make sure that people are connecting with what you think the core message is that you're trying to get across to them.
So now that you're in your big boy job, what are some classes you wish you took at AU? Like prepare you, like if 40-year-old Nate can speak to 20-year-old Nate, what classes would you tell him to take?
Great question. I think I would have taken more classes in just other parts of the campus. I took a poetry class through the English department that I loved. I wish I would have taken more of those. I took no classes through Ashbrook. I think that was a very obvious missed opportunity because, 19-year-olds, at least in my case, with a vision on serving the church is like, what does politics have to do with anything? And it turns out quite a lot. So I regret not taking those classes. And I do think I always loved science too. And so again, just in the sense of that liberal arts education where you're getting something from the arts, you're getting something from the hard sciences, you're getting something from the social sciences, you're getting something from communication and language. I often am often reflecting on the fact that I'm close enough that I probably could just audit courses. I know that's
Yeah.
offered to university students, or university alumni. So I often think I should just do that. I should just audit a class or two. Maybe I'll do this.
I definitely recommend taking a course with Dr. Piscatello.
I would
Absolutely.
love to have you,
What
but
is it
yeah,
called? Marriage and Society?
I'm
Oh,
surprised I didn't rope you into that one. I haven't taught it for a couple years. That was a fun class. Can you tell me about wolves?
so much. So much. Wolves are a keystone species. We found this out when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park in 1995 through a reintroduction program. And the park had been struggling with ecological diversity since the wolves had been eliminated in the early 20s from Yellowstone. And they have a term now that they use, which is trophic cascade. It's when you reintroduce a keystone species into an environment that it's been absent in, it fundamentally changes the ecosystem from the top down. And they found that exactly that happened at Yellowstone. And so now we're 30 years since the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone, and there is tons of literature and papers and different books that you can read about this and how critical ecosystems are to have those keystone species as a part of them.
Can you tell them why I asked you about wolves?
I like wolves. You know, I grew up in Appalachia. I've mentioned that a couple times. And so like your choices when you're growing up is like, what are you going to be into? Are you going to be into NASCAR, professional wrestling, or wolves? And I chose wolves.
Or raccoons?
What's that? Any wildlife that you could conceivably shoot and mount on the inside of your trailer. That's what you're going for. So
You are an avid reader and also an avid runner and um, a father. You have a beautiful family. And how do you balance all of that?
I don't know that I do.
What's your secret sauce?
I think the real answer is I don't waste a lot of time. I think when I'm resting, I try to rest, which means I don't have screens on. I try to be present with my family. And then when I'm working, I really try to work and I try to focus and I try to accomplish the things that I can. Also, I think it's very easy to chase the allure of promotion. But I have found in my experience that there's another inverse power of just the power of staying in one place for a long time. You can actually accomplish a lot if you just stay in one place and just do it little by little. And so I think that's kind of the thing that I've attempted to do. It's just little by little, do what we can do today, rest well, and then try to do your best tomorrow. And after, 10 years in a place, you look around and you're like, oh, hey, we've changed some stuff around here. This is great.
It's wonderful. For students who are still figuring out their direction, what would you say to help them discover their purpose or calling in life?
So I think the wisdom that we have been hearing for years and years is that you need your job to kind of fulfill every personal need of flourishing that you have. And I think actually part of one of the reasons that I've been able to stay and maybe even succeed in my roles is that I don't need my success in my job to define all of my happiness, right? As you mentioned, I love running. I love being outside. I love learning. I love reading. I love spending time with my family. So really, if the job went away tomorrow, I would still feel very grateful and full of purpose in my life. And I think sometimes, even though we know jobs are so important and finding the right fit is really critical, the reality is, as we all know, the amount of change in careers these days is increasing to 4, 5, 6 careers, not just jobs, but changing 4 to 5, 6 careers. And I think part of that is because perhaps we've overemphasized how important it is for you just to love the work you're in. Certainly, finding a job that's meaningful to you is important. And the thing I always say to people in ministry, which is not new, but I echo the sentiment because I think it's true. If you can find anything else to do and live with yourself, you should do it. This is not a job that you're like, oh yeah, I think I might try ministry. It's like, no, there's way too much heartache. There's way too much brokenness. There's way too much pain involved. If you're just looking for a job, there's probably a million other ways that you could be using your gift set. So I think that's really, so out of that idea of don't expect your vocation to be the only source of fulfillment in your life. That's where I feel like a liberal arts education at Ashland University is so great because you can get a breadth of information and teaching so that if you do feel like, okay, hey, I've tried science for a few years and I'm ready for a change. It's like, okay, cool. Draw back from your experience during your undergraduate career. What else would you like to pursue? What other things are out there? So for me, if ministry ends up not working out, I can just fall back on WoW ecology. I could be a shoe seller for runners. I could just be a beatnik who reads poetry in small, dimly lit coffee shops. There's so many options for me.
That's awesome. Do you agree, Chuck? What are your thoughts on that?
About job, like I'm all over the place. I'm the worst person to ask, but I think I try to follow like what I enjoy, and it looks like that's what Nate did too. And it's
Yeah.
not about like the paycheck or the lack of stress. And I think overall we're pretty blessed about like living in an economy that's like service, and I'm not thrown into a coal mine or have to carry bricks in a wheelbarrow. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we all agree that college life can be very overwhelming at times. How do you think students can stay grounded and focused with so much going on around them? Earlier you mentioned like, the importance of being able to disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, so really interesting things currently culturally with extended adolescence in the sense of, even though I went to AU 20 years ago, I do feel like there's been fundamental shifts in generations. When I came to AU as an 18-year-old, I felt like I was an adult. I felt like I was a young adult, but I fundamentally felt like I was in control of my life and my decisions, and I took ownership for them. I feel like that's probably not as much the norm these days. I feel like college feels like an extension in some ways of adolescence and high school. And that's not meant to be pejorative in any way. I think that's just part of the landscape. But whether you view yourself as an adult, as an 18-year-old, or just a kid still, I think fundamentally in that life stage, what everybody could benefit from is just an increased amount of discipline, just a fundamental naming your priorities and then intentionally creating your calendar to match those priorities. College goes by fast. It might seem like a kind of a grind at the time, but 4 years really does go by really quickly. And it's easy because there's so much being offered and there's so many things that you could get involved with. It's easy for those 4 years just to fly by without you going, wait, did I get everything out of this experience that I wanted to? Did I accrue the skills that I need to in order to go to the next stage of life? And so I was really fortunate to have mentors early on in my college experience kind of come around me and insist on that level of intentionality with my calendar. I worked at the Ashland University Rec Center for 5 years. And at the time, the director's name was Sean Reese, and he was just adamant about the way students should structure their calendars would be classes first, work second, extracurriculars third. And that really served me well because, like we said, there's just a million things you could do. There's so many great organizations on campus. There's so many
Right.
meaningful things to do that you could just easily overfill your schedule and never get the real skills and experiences that you really want, despite the fact that you've been really, really busy for 4 years.
Very good point. Yeah. Chuck, any final questions?
We went this whole time without asking about Enneagram and how
Yeah.
you fell into writing a book about pretty much like a personality quiz.
Yeah. So from 2010 to 2015, I was also an employee at Ashland University, and I was a part of the Office of Christian Ministry. And in just our attempt to kind of contribute to the conversation you guys are having about helping students identify giftedness and calling and vocation, we just used every personality assessment we could get our hands on. It was like Myers-Briggs, the Big Five, the, MBTI, Strengths Finders, anything that we could find that we would throw at our students just to help them develop a sense of what are you good at, what are your preferences, and then kind of try to encourage them to pursue courses and majors that would align with those kind of vocational goals. And so I just discovered this very strange, very kind of an oddball personality assessment that my friends in psychology assure me are not valid in any scientifically meaningful way, I must say. And yet there's just something about growing in self-awareness. So I don't necessarily need the model to be perfect. I just need it to help open up a student or a person trying to develop more of a sense of self to reflection and kind of self-examination practices. So yeah, I found this self-assessment. It's been wildly helpful to me in ministry because what this assessment attempts to do is not just name external preferences, but internal motivators. And people, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but people don't always say what they mean. Sometimes they're not aware of the different conflicting values that they might be holding. And so I have just found this to be a really helpful method or tool to use to kind of help people open up the hood, look underneath, and see what's going on internally.
That's wonderful. That's awesome. And you can find the book on Amazon, right?
I don't know if you can find it on Amazon. I have a
I
website,
think it is. Yeah.
natebebout.com.
Okay.
You can find it on Amazon too, apparently.
I'm sorry, you cut out. What's the website again?
Just my name, Nate Bebout.
Okay, nice. Awesome. So, as a final question, Nate, we usually finish with a piece of advice that you'd like to leave our students with.
The advice is this: every system in life kind of has a biological system kind of has three really important factors: energy in, energy out, and rest. And we as human beings know how those things can get out of whack. If the energy in, the calories we take in is more than the calories we use, we put on weight, maybe we feel bloated and unmotivated, especially when those calories are sugar and dyed different colors and stuff like that. We know the challenges on the other side of too much energy out and not enough energy in. You're working too hard and you're not supporting yourself with enough, good food. You get stressed out, you get burnout, you get injured, you get overwhelmed. And then also the lack of rest, which is chronic in our culture. The need to grind, the need to be entertained and distracted all the time prevents us from getting the rest we need to repair ourselves so that we can do more work. So I have just found fundamentally life is just better when those three things are in balance, when you are taking in the right amount, when you are giving out the right amount, and when you're resting. Now, that could be literally physically as far as calories and exercise and good sleep, but it's also true spiritually or emotionally or mentally. If you are constantly consuming but never serving in any area of life, you tend to get bloated and lazy and all this stuff. But if those three things can come in balance, you're learning, you're serving, and you're resting, I think there's some real power to that level of balance, like I said, that we see across biological systems. So in the midst of the frenzy of the college years, finding time to rest, you have so many opportunities to learn and to grow and to receive. And you have so many opportunities to serve and to be involved on campus, but making sure that you're also resting, because without that, the balance doesn't really happen.
Love that. Love that. Nate, we could honestly talk with you all day. You're such a joy to chat with,
You're so kind.
but we don't want to be too selfish with your time. And so we'll go ahead and wrap up the episode here. A big thank you to my co-host, Dr. Chuck Piscatello, for joining us and joining the conversation. And to our guest, Reverend Nate Bebout, for taking the time to share his story and for all he does to serve our community. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.